Now what I want to do is make our show template. So I'm going to comment this out so that we're not constantly making a new campground every time we start the server. So right now we only have one going on. And down here, let me add my label, show. Shows more info about one campground. So we need to find the campground. We'll come back to that. And then we need to render the show template. So let's start with that. Res.render show. And then we need to create that template. So we're going to do touch views/show.ejs and then c9 views/show.ejs and then add in a very simple h1. This is the show template. There we go. And save. Let's make sure that that works. Refresh. Now if we try and get to a URL that is a show route, campground/anything, that isn't new. Campground/new is special because it takes us to the new form, but any other ID, and our IDs will look like that. And those are coming from Mongo. So those IDs are automatically generated by Mongo when we save something. And what we're going to start by doing is actually adding in the links to the show page so that we have a button here that we can click to view more information. So I need to open up views/campgrounds.ejs. And technically we should rename this file to be index.ejs rather than campgrounds because we're following this convention. So we have new, we have show. We should name this index rather than campgrounds. So we can do that pretty quickly over here. Just go to views, campgrounds, and we can rename it index.ejs. There's also many ways to do this via the terminal, but that will be fastest for now rather than showing you another command. So we'll do that, and then we need to make sure our app.js is rendering the right template. So this should render index now. Okay, so now what we want to do is rather than just displaying for each campground an image and a name, I'm also going to add a paragraph in here, and in that paragraph, I'm going to add an anchor tag. And we'll fix the href in a second. It's going to be an anchor tag that says more info, and we'll give it a class also. We'll use Bootstrap, and we'll do btn and btn primary. Just like that. And save. And let's just see how that looks first. So it won't work yet. It won't go anywhere. But if we refresh, all right, that looks good enough for now. We have a more info button. We click on it. Right now it refreshes the page, but we want it to take us to the show page. So to do that, we need to change our template, and our href needs to look like this, /campgrounds/some ID. And that ID is stored inside of campground._ID. So we need to use EJS here. And here I'm going to write campground._ID, which is part of campground. Campground is the name that we're giving each campground in the for each. We're printing out image and name. There's also a description that we're not showing, but there is an ID that we're going to use to create the link. So if I restart now, and we take a look at what that gives us, let's inspect this. You can see it's campgrounds/ this crazy long hexadecimal automatically generated MongoDB ID. And if we click on that link, it takes us to the show template, campgrounds/ and that crazy ID. Then what we need to do is use that ID inside of the show template, or inside the show route, which is right here. We want to capture that ID, which is going to be inside of request.params.id, just like when we did the farm animal thing with the pigs and the oink and cow and moo, where we had colon and then some route param. It's stored inside request.params. What we're going to do is use a new method that Mongoose gives us called findById. And we're doing that on campground. So campground.findById, and there's two arguments we need to give it, which is the ID and then the callback. So the first one is easiest. The ID is just request.params.id, and the callback looks just like our other ones where we have error, and then let's call it found campground, which is the data coming back from this findById. So there should only be one item in the database with that ID, which is the point of these IDs in Mongo. They're unique, so that we won't have any issues with multiple conflicting campsites like we might if we were looking things up by their title or their name or their image, which we could do. This doesn't have to be an ID. It could be name. And actually, if we take a look at Reddit, no. But ID again is unique, so it's much safer. So this will hopefully find a campground, and we'll do our simple error checking. If there's an error, console.log it. Otherwise, if it worked, what we're going to do is render the show template, and that's a res.render show, but we're going to pass in the found campground, and then we're going to use it inside that template. So res.render show, and then we're going to pass in, under the name campground, we're going to pass our found campground. So then inside our show template, we can access campground, and it will have the value of whatever we found with this ID. So we'll save, go to show.ejs, and let's do something very simple where we just add a paragraph, and in that paragraph, we're going to add in campground.name, and we'll just leave it at that. And then we'll add some other stuff in just a moment, but let's make sure it works. So we'll go back, refresh, and if we click on this link, we get a rather dramatic error that says has no method find by ID, and that's a pretty silly one because we don't want to capitalize that F there. So if we go back and just fix this very briefly, so it's find with a lowercase f. Remember, all methods start with a lowercase. Now if we call it, restart the server, and refresh, we get this is the show template, Granite Hill. Of course, we want to show more than Granite Hill, but it's the same process. We now are taking this ID and we're trying to find a campground with that ID, and then we're rendering this template. So let's quickly, we're not going to style it, but let's quickly go back to show, and we'll add in an image again, and the source is going to be equal to campground.image, and then we'll also add in at the bottom another paragraph, and this one is going to have campground.description, just like that, and we'll save that. Let's take the name here and move that up so that our H1 says just the campground name, just like that. And if we refresh now, we get Granite Hill, and we see this here, our image, and then this is a huge granite hill, no bathrooms, no water, beautiful granite. And we should add in our layout as well, just with our quick includes. So include, and let's just copy it from another template here just to save time. So we'll copy that in and then do the same thing for our footer. And now we should see some bootstrap. There we go, we get the nav bar, we get our font change. We still have to style this, which will be coming soon. So everything appears to be working well, except for one small thing, which is if I add in a new campground, it still is only name and image. So let's refactor that. We need to go back to the form, which is in new. So let's close out of here and let's open up views/new. And inside of there, we need another input, which I'll just put at the bottom right before the button. And our input is going to have a placeholder of description. And eventually we'll want to make this a bigger input. For now, it's just a text input. And then we'll change the name to be description. And we'll save. And we can now go back to our app.js. And in here, inside of the create, we'll also grab the description. So var description, and I'll just do dsc equals request.body.description, which is what the name attribute was set to right here. There we go. And we're going to take that and then pass it in to our new object, where description is equal to this variable that we're grabbing from the form, desc. And we save. Everything else should work exactly the same. We're now just adding this extra piece of data in from the form. Let's test it out. Start the server up. Refresh the form. We now have 3 inputs. So I have an image URL that I've copied from here, and I'm going to paste that in. And we'll call this campground with trees. And here we'll say this place has lots of trees and also lots of other stuff. All right, click submit. We now get 2 campgrounds. And the true test is to see if this one has a description. So let's click on more info, and it does. You can see that this page contains all the information we have about one campground that has this ID. And if we go back, this show page has all the information about this campground. Okay, so we got the show page working. Let's quickly wrap everything up. So we talked about RESTful routes. There are 4 now that we've covered. The index will show all of a given resource, like dogs or campground. The new route shows a form to create a new resource. Create is the post route, where we actually do the creation of the resource. And show is a route that's a GET request, and it has an ID in the URL. And that's really important because it shows information about one resource. In our case, one dog, or in our app, one campground. And the new command that we saw to do that, to interact with Mongo, is find by ID. And then a quick side note, I also showed db.collection.drop, which we use to delete all the existing campgrounds in our database with one command.